Growing up in rural Ohio with no car of my own and pretty little money, I didn't have access to comics very often. It would be years before I discovered Comic Book City in Madison, Ohio, and it would become my main shop for the next 8 years. So, one of the main ways that I would get comics was accidentally, at yard sales. And let me tell you, there was nothing better than finding a box of someone's random-ass comics and searching for treasure. I'm sure that, to this day, the reason that I like digging through dollar boxes comes from a childhood spent searching for any issue related to the X-Men that I could find. This wasn't just true for me, either. One of my childhood friends, Neil, had a huge box of comics that his mom got him while yard sailing. Almost none of it was bagged and boarded. Neil definitely didn't care about his comics like I cared about his comics. But it was his books that introduced me to the pre-Age of Apocalypse X books, the Clone Saga, and Larry Hama's run on Wolverine. Among that stack of books was today's first issue, Wolverine issue 87, originally published in November of 1994. I still haven't decided yet if I want to collect Wolverine's ongoing series. I once promised myself as a child that I would collect every X-Men book, not realizing what I had been getting myself into. Despite that, I am very close these days. Wolverine is honestly the single longest comic that I haven't collected at this point. After all, there's just so much of it. But I can't deny that I fell in love with this era of the title when I was a kid, and I'm pretty happy to be looking at it once more. Just this cover? Oh man! It's got 90s bad boys Wolverine and Gambit running across the rooftops of a glittering cityscape. A targeting reticle frames them, promising that in this issue, someone will be hunting our boys, which means they're either tough or stupid. The reticle even cuts the Wolverine logo in half, so the words frame the image. Artist Adam Kubert is an industry legend, and he really likes playing with page layouts, camera angles, and cover designs. This cover is at once terribly straightforward. Someone is hunting Wolverine and Gambit, yeah, we get it. But it's also incredibly eye-catching, and it manages to do it all at once. God, I wish I knew how many times I read this issue as a kid. Well, let's add one more to the count. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown episode 10.1, Maverick, Prologue 1. Jeez, Ben, you are blank minutes into this episode, and you haven't even talked about Maverick, your very subject matter, yet. And calm down. Patience, young Padawan, I'm getting there. This issue of Wolverine is the issue that introduced me to Maverick, and it's also the issue that starts Maverick's status quo that we'll be following moving forward. As far as I'm concerned, this is where we start with our enigmatic lead character. You gotta let me put the pieces in one pile before we can put the puzzle together, folks. Like I said, Wolverine issue 87 was published in November of 1994, and it's a pretty interesting time to be reading the book. Author Larry Hama joined the creative team of Wolverine at issue 31, and wrote almost every issue until 118, nearly 87 issues and 7.5 years later. Other than Chris Claremont writing Wolverine as part of the X-Men, I don't think that any other author has had as long a run as Larry Hama. Just over a year before issue 87, Wolverine and his buds, the X-Men, confronted Magneto during the Fatal Attractions crossover, and things didn't really go well for anyone. During the battle, Wolverine unleashed his adamantium claws against Magneto, actually trying to kill him. Hurt by this attack, as Wolverine and Magneto were once X-Men for a time in the late 80s, Magneto grabbed a hold of the metal in Wolverine's bones and pulled it all out! The attack nearly killed Wolverine, and, in retaliation, Charles Xavier used his telepathic powers to wipe Magneto's mind. It was only thanks to the help of his teammates that Wolverine even survived the trip back to the mansion. But he still didn't recover fully. The damage to his body taxed and almost burned out his healing factor, meaning that it took him much longer to recover from damage, and he couldn't handle as severe damage as he could have before. His unbreakable claws were gone as well, although bone claws remained in their place. Seeing himself as a liability to the team, Logan left the X-Men. He traveled the world, visiting old friends and putting his affairs in order, just in case the worst happened. This is what brings him to the southeast island nation of Madripoor. Logan spent quite some time here in his life, where he was known by the alias, and the disguise over his eye, of Patch. Gambit, a fellow X-Man, has traveled across the world to talk to Logan about the murderous villain Sabretooth, who recently took up residence at the X-Mansion. They meet at Logan's favorite dive, the Princess Bar, but they find it suspiciously quiet. Logan can tell that there are people inside, but they're hiding, so the seasoned warriors know to expect an ambush. They both steel themselves and count it up. 1, 2, 3! They don't find a surprise attack inside. They find a surprise party! Logan's friends had heard that he was back in town, and they wanted to welcome him back in style. They don't even mind the broken window, even if it is a bit too early to start smashing things. Embarrassed, Logan introduces the party to Remy LeBeau, aka Gambit, but the ladies of the night recognize him right away, and they are happy to see him again. We get a whirlwind introduction to Logan's old friends, including Rose Wu, who runs the bar now with a man named O'Donnell, former pilot Archie Corrigan, Chief of Police Ty, and crime lord of Madripoor, the beautiful Tiger, who sweeps Logan off of his feet and onto the dance floor. One of the many things that I love about Larry Hama's run of Wolverine is how grounded it all feels. Like, I know that Logan has superpowers and a yellow and blue costume, and there's so much silly and crazy stuff about him and around him. But Hama always finds a way to ground Logan. He makes him feel like a real person in the real world. He's been wanted by the police. He's worked for criminals. He's fallen in love and made friends and left a trail of bodies, loves, and allies behind him. I had never heard of any of these people before when I was a kid, and I loved seeing this kind of thing, especially given how mysterious Logan's past still was at this point. Seeing anything that hinted at a life outside of the X-Men was great to me, and I ate it up. This scene actually really reads like something out of Indiana Jones more so than a superhero comic, and I love that. Even now, years later, I'm honestly still unsure of who most of these characters are. Like I said, I don't have Wolverine's book, so I haven't read the source material where these people were introduced. But the idea here isn't to swamp you in Wolverine nostalgia or to test your trivia knowledge. Hama isn't trying to punish you for not reading the past 80 issues of Wolverine. He's showing you how important Logan was, and is, to these people. He's had a major impact on all of their lives, and they love him for it. At a time when Logan wasn't doing very well himself, even going so far as to distance himself from his family and the X-Men, this show of support is much needed. It does hint at older Wolverine narratives, and I'll admit, that can be jarring. This is not a fresh, clean jumping on point for new readers. But this kind of presentation of history always enticed me more than it's annoyed me. Reading this issue, I want to go back and buy a ton of back issues so that I can know more about these people and their relationships with Logan. Adam Kubert did pencils for this issue, and he was inked by, get this, Mark Farmer, Dan Green, Tim Townsend, and Joe Rubinstein. That's 4 inkers for one artist on one book. That's pretty crazy. But Kubert's artwork here really needs that many inkers. This book is drawn fairly realistic, and there's definitely an emphasis on shadows and small details and the shaping of objects. And the pages look great. Adam Kubert really likes to slip in vertical pages where you have to turn the book like it's a pinup magazine, and that way he can do some crazy page layouts. And right here on pages 2 and 3 we get one as Wolverine and Gambit shatter the window of the princess. That means that there's shards of broken glass everywhere, there's details on Wolverine and Gambit's faces, their bodies, their hair, and then the following panels and the interior details of the bar. The princess is, after all, a dive bar located in the bad part of Madripoor called Lowtown. The area is rife with crime and dirt and graffiti. There's always steam or smoke filling the air. This helps that grounded, realistic feel that I mentioned as well. The bar actually really feels like Rick's Cafe from Casablanca, enhancing that feeling of spies, former lovers, and corrupt officials. Of minor yet interesting note is that Gambit has been here before, and Logan didn't know that. Back in '94, both of these men were pretty mysterious, to be quite honest. Neither one of their backgrounds had really been explored all that much. There had been one story in the X-Men back in June of 1992 where the X-Men crossed over with Ghost Rider in New Orleans, and Gambit's self-titled miniseries was published almost a year before this issue of Wolverine. So why had Gambit been in Madripoor before? We don't know. I still don't think it's ever really been brought up. But this is still an interesting reveal, much like Gambit's interest in Sabretooth. You see, Sabretooth had been brought/taken to the X-Mansion for help curbing his homicidal tendencies. Always believing in the innate goodness of humanity, Charles Xavier agreed to help him, and the X-Men had some pretty mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, Xavier had a history of taking in hard cases and turning them around, like former Brotherhood member Rogue, and Wolverine himself, of course. But Sabretooth was a step too far for Logan, and was part of the reason that he stayed away from the mansion. Logan wanted to believe that if anyone could reach Victor Creed's humanity, that it would be Charles Xavier. But Creed reveled in his violence, and there was just too much bad blood between the two men for Logan to forgive. And apparently, the same was true for Gambit. The beef between Gambit and Sabretooth is something that will end up playing out in Uncanny X-Men, but I didn't remember this issue touching upon it at all. This felt like something new to me. But Gambit's come to Madripoor to talk to Logan about Sabretooth. We don't get into that conversation at all here before the glass starts breaking, Logan starts dancing, and then Gambit starts a smooching, but we will come back around to it. As Logan and Tiger dance, a pair of red-clad ninjas armed with laser guns, yes, ninjas armed with laser guns, it's the 90s, watch from the skylight above. These are members of The Hand, a clan of assassins who have a long-standing series of problems with Logan. They debate killing Logan and Tiger both, but one of them argues against it. Killing a crime boss like Tiger would upset their masters. Better to just wait and kill Wolverine when he's alone. From nearby, a mysterious voice admonishes the ninjas for this decision. They turn, hurling shuriken at him, but both miss, and he fires an enormous plasma blast at them, killing them both in one shot. The bodies fall through the skylight, right above Logan. Without missing a step in his dance, Logan twirls Tiger, pops his claws, shreds the ninjas, sheathes them again, and then catches his partner before she tips over onto the floor. Gambit, covered in lipstick, applauds the show. Logan isn't happy, though. He can tell that those two were dead before his claws even got to them, and that means trouble. The pair book it out of the princess and onto the roof. Logan tries to find a scent there, but he can't. Not only are his senses still reeling from his wounds, but their mystery figure hid their scent. Whoever this person is, they're good. It reminds Logan of how Sabretooth used to cover his tracks back when they ran covert missions for the CIA. Of course, that gets Gambit's attention, and he asks for more details. Back in the day, Sabretooth was just Victor Creed, Wolverine was just a man named Logan, and their final partner was Maverick. Yeah, finally, we get to Maverick. As Team X, the trio would run all kinds of missions for the CIA, and on one mission in particular, things went to hell fast. They got the information that they had been sent for, but they also got caught and were running and dodging fire when we joined the narrative. Maverick shouted over the gunfire that someone has to make it out alive, no matter the cost. Creed is glad to hear that Maverick is willing to lay down his life so that he can make it. Good plan. I like this plan. Maverick corrects him, suggesting that they split up. That'll force their pursuers to split up as well, and that will give them all better odds of survival. Logan isn't down for that idea. They trained as a team, they fight as a team. An explosion hits their cover, and Creed is the one who catches the majority of the blast. Maverick declares him dead. They need to move. But Logan says that he ain't dead yet, and they can't just leave him. And Maverick actually agrees with this. Creed knows too much about them. Then he cocks his gun. Logan shoves the plasma rifle out of the way. He throws Creed over his back. They are a team, and they are all going back. Man, is there a limit to how cool Wolverine can possibly be? Because I'm not sure that there is, and it's stuff like this that convinces me of that. The pair run until they hit some kind of chasm, a dangling rope bridge the only way across. There is an army of high-tech enemies behind them, and this is their only way out. They're going to have to risk it. All of their chatter about it, though, has bought Creed enough time to recover from his wounds. He snatches a gun off of Logan's belt and blasts the bridge. Maverick takes up a firing position, and Logan tosses Creed to the ground, pissed as hell. But Creed just smiles. These yahoos were expecting them to cross that bridge. It was a trap, and their whole team would get wiped out. They need to do what their enemies won't expect, and that means turning around and diving in. Maverick and Logan have little choice at this point. They grit their teeth, aim their guns, and follow Creed back into the fray. On the roof of the Princess, Logan admits that Sabretooth can have his uses. He is fearless, willing to do whatever he has to in order to accomplish his goals. He'll work with you, so long as it suits him. So, Gambit asks, does Logan think that Creed will change? That Xavier can actually save him? And no, Logan doesn't. Xavier is crazy to think that Creed is going to change now. Quote, "Old Mr. Creed wouldn't spit in your face if your nose was on fire. He just ain't no team player." End quote. Gambit lights up a cigarette. "And how about you, Logan? Are you still a team player?" The X-Men thought that he was one of them, 100%, but he's out here alone, doing who knows what. Is that agenda more important than them? Logan is just about to retort when, instead, he tosses Gambit to the side, dodging the plasma blast that was meant for him. The pair immediately start to chase the shooter, which is a good place for us to reflect for a moment. "'Cause I love this stuff!" Marvel never seemed willing to reveal all of Logan's history, so I barely knew anything about him at all as a kid. But learning that Wolverine not only ran covert ops for the US government, but that he did them with Sabretooth, his greatest enemy, his most personal threat, one of the deadliest and most vicious guys in X history, blew my little mind. There were no claws here, there was no mask. Even his healing factor was something that he kept quiet about, and that was cool. And I got the added bonus of meeting Maverick, who worked with Logan and Creed, so he was obviously as cool as they were. This flashback, paired with the Princess bar scene, really makes me hungry for more Wolverine comics. Obviously, if you couldn't tell, I like this flashback sequence. It's not only a cool peek into Logan's past, but it sheds some character light on Sabretooth as well. Marie Javins colored the whole scene in washed-out grays and oranges, as if the panels were black and white photos in a discarded manila envelope in some government storage facility. Kubert, or maybe one of his inkers, roughs up all of the borders as well, making them shaky and violent, echoing the danger that Team X was in. And, of course, we get to meet Maverick. Maverick is the only one of the three characters to specifically obscure his face. He wears a metal or plastic mask that covers from the tip of his nose to his hairline, hiding his eyes. Black paint circles the eyes of the masks, pointing down at the corner like daggers. He's also the only one of the three with a code name. Wolverine is just Logan, Sabretooth is just Creed, and Maverick is, well, Maverick. He's a mystery. But we know that he's goal-oriented and almost as cold as Creed, willing to kill him once he threatens the mission. Logan fights to be a team player, hinting at his future relationships with both Alpha Flight and the X-Men, while Creed's bloodlust forces them all into inevitable violence. Out of the three, Maverick is the one who feels the most like a secret agent or a spy. The scene between Gambit and Logan after the flashback is nice. Logan confirms that, in his expert opinion, Creed is too dangerous to trust. He can be pointed and fired, sure, but he can't be trusted. I'd say that this is something that Gambit already knew, and so it's interesting that Gambit tries to guilt Logan afterwards. The X-Men care about him, they love him, and even Gambit knows it. He wants Logan back at the mansion, and I suspect it's because he wants another pair of doubtful eyes watching old Victor Creed. But we don't learn more about Gambit's motives because of the attack on them. Wolverine and Gambit give chase, jumping roofs to catch up to their quarry. Their assailant chucks some smoke grenades at them, forcing them to pause for a moment. The attacker then doubles back and attacks Gambit, pistol whipping him in the head. But Wolverine suspected that this might be the case and pops his claws, slashing through said rifle. The comic rotates again into another vertical page as Logan slashes at the attacker's cowl, hoping that there ain't a psychopathic millionaire with a utility belt under it. But no, as the cowl is torn away and the smoke fades, it's Maverick! And he quick draws some energy pistols. "Come on, Logan," he growls. "Let's go." Something isn't right here, though, and Logan knows it. Gambit, however, does not, and a trio of kinetically charged cards detonate underneath Maverick. He rolls through the air, landing further up the rooftop, and Gambit is ready to finish him off if Logan can't. But Logan says no. He's got this. Logan slowly walks up the rooftop, and Maverick has his pistols trained on him the whole time. But he never fires. Logan keeps coming, delivering some fantastic Larry Hama trademark tough guy talk all the way up until he's staring Maverick's guns down. Then he slashes them aside, disarming his old ally. Maverick hasn't been trying to kill them at all. He's been trying to get them to kill him. Whoa. That is not your usual superhero comic storyline. Logan asks why, and Maverick answers by removing his mask. The camera rotates so that we're looking out from Maverick's point of view and into Wolverine and Gambit's faces. And what they see horrifies them. Maverick has the legacy virus. In the final stages, he won't even be able to move. As a fighter, as a warrior, that's not how Maverick wanted to die. He thought about going down while fighting some bad guys, maybe make the world a safer place, But the thought of dying at some delusional jerk-hat's hands didn't sit right with him. Yes, he wanted a warrior's death, but by a warrior that he respected. Like Logan. And I love Logan's retort here. Quote, "What am I, a Viking funeral director?" End quote. Well, he won't kill Maverick. Not only does Logan have enough death on his conscience as it is, but a real man doesn't just quit living. Quote, "You gotta take that long walk into darkness just the same as if you were going to the hardware store. You don't just drop out." End quote. This is where Maverick cuts him off. Oh, you mean like you've been doing, Logan? Maybe a dying man should just live the rest of his life while not wallowing in his end. Maybe a man should make the most of the time that he has. Maybe Logan should take his own advice. And then Maverick leaves. Gambit tries to tell Logan not to take it too hard, but no, Maverick's right in his own way. He did exactly what he set out to do here. And so the issue ends. Was Maverick really trying to commit suicide by Wolverine? Or was he just kicking an old friend in the ass one last time? Gambit came to Madripoor to remind Logan of his ties to the X-Men and the life that he was ignoring. And Maverick did the same thing, in his own way. The time of Logan feeling sorry for himself needs to end. Logan has family anxiously waiting for him, and he needs to get back to it. This issue is the last one of Wolverine wandering about the world. Issue 88 returns him to America, ultimately putting him back on the road to the X-Mansion. So, if this was the goal of Gambit and Maverick, they are successful. But it sends Maverick off into the unknown. The legacy virus was a mutant-based illness in the early 90s, the fallout of a previous big event. The virus would essentially turn a mutant's own powers against them, breaking them down and then burning them out. At this point in the world of the X-Men, a number of characters had acquired it, including X-Factor's Multiple Man, the Brotherhood's Pyro, and Colossus's little sister, Illyana Rasputin. A number of mutants actually died from the virus, including Multiple Man and Illyana, so it was known to be lethal. And here was Maverick, having only appeared one other time in X-Men Volume 2, Issues 5 and 6, ready and willing to die. That stuck with me. This story really stuck with me, and I can't say that Logan's line about handling death didn't make an impact on me as a person. But so did Maverick's role in this story. He was willing to die already, so where does he go from here? How long would he live for? And if he did die, would we lose access to another piece of Wolverine's mysterious past forever? I would have to know. But before I did, we need to meet another character first, in X-Men Unlimited, Issue 8. X-Men Unlimited was a quarterly title, meaning a new issue was published every 4 months. Because of this, it was also double-sized, and its stories were frequently placed outside the purview of the main X-Men comics. Some issues you can skip entirely, but others end up being used as important plot points or for the introduction of new characters. For example, Issue 3 is where Sabretooth went to the X-Men seeking help, and Issue 4 confirmed that Nightcrawler was the son of the villainous Mystique. Issue 1 introduced new character Sienna Blaze, and no one ever really liked her, and here in Issue 8, we're going to be meeting Chris Bradley. Published in October of 1995, Issue 8 was written by Howard Mackie, penciled by Dan Lawless and Tom Grummett, and was inked by Ian Aiken. It opens in Dutchess County, New York, where teenager Chris Bradley is not having a good day. Sure, he got up on time and beat his little sister to the bathroom, but his head is killing him. His sister, Kathy, pounds on the door and the pain just rises and rises. Kathy finally shouts for her parents to intervene, and their dad tells Chris to let her have her turn, which is when electricity explodes out from Chris's body. The whole house shorts, but thankfully none of it hit Kathy. Dad and Mom rush to the bathroom at Kathy's scream, and they find that Chris has collapsed. The best part of waking up is dangerous mutant powers. His parents put Chris back to bed, forbidding him from going to school. Whatever happened, he needs rest. Chris tries to blow off the incident. I mean, the house needs an electrician more than he needs a doctor. But they are adamant that he rest, and so he stays home. The next morning, things are going fine. Chris is ready to finally do it. And we'll get what he wants to do in a minute, and so he starts on his walk to school. As he leaves the house, though, he notices a gorgeous redhead who seems to be staring him down. I mean, that's flattering, lady, really, but he's a little too young for you. Chris's friend Jeff runs into him soon and starts to tease him about asking Donna Funero out. He's had a crush on Donna since the 6th grade, and she's the hottest girl in school. Chris is going to need all of his focus for this. But his focus is all crocus as a topless red sports car pulls up to the school. The redhead rides shotgun, but the driver is a man. Chris can't tell it from here, but the camera moves in, showing us his red and black eyes. The young man panics, wanting to go inside where he feels safe. Turning, he doesn't see the backpack behind him, and he trips, landing at Donna's feet like an idiot. She greets him, and Chris plays off the accident, saying that he's practicing worshipping at her feet. Donna seems to like the joke, and she helps him up, and they chat a bit. Chris then asks if he can talk to her after class, and Donna offers to walk home with him. Ooh, Chris, you got this, man. They go inside, and since she's cool with walking home together, Chris asks if maybe she'd like to, go see a movie sometime. And she would! Hell yeah, man! Asking out someone you like is simultaneously so easy and the hardest thing to possibly do. The pair go to class, but it doesn't take long for Chris's head to start pounding again. It passes for a moment. But while in class, Chris spots the redhead and the man outside on the grounds again. This time the pain spikes and electrical sparks start to jump from his hands. Chris excuses himself to the restroom and takes off, afraid of having an attack in front of Donna. The pain pauses and then comes back even stronger. Electricity sparks off of Chris, even from his eyes, and he cries out as his body releases an electrostatic field that engulfs the school. This effect is witnessed by our mystery peeps, who are actually the X-Men Jean Grey and Gambit. They rush inside, but it takes Jean a minute to find Chris telepathically. Once she does, they find that the electrical burst has welded the door shut, forcing Gambit to blow it open. Like a living lightning rod, blue energy pours off of Chris. He shouts that he doesn't know what is happening and that they should get away. And then he passes out. Gambit spots some school officials on their way to the bathroom and suggests a quick exit. He blows the window out, and Jean telekinetically lifts the three of them out and away. They take Chris home, and as they land, he's starting to come around. His mom is naturally worried, but Chris has no explanation for what happened. Jean, however, does. But Mrs. Bradley should call Chris's father. He's going to need to hear this too. Eventually, Mr. Bradley does come home, and Jean explains about Xavier's school and how it helps mutants control their powers. Mutants like Chris. Nobody takes the M word well, especially Chris, and electricity starts to spark off of him. Then he starts to apologize to his parents for doing this to them, even though he has no say in the matter. His mom reaches out, seeking to comfort him, but he pulls back, unsure of whether or not he would hurt her. He's starting to panic for real now. Jean tries to calm him down. The school is able to help him, that's why they're here. But Chris doesn't want to have people like them help him, and so he rushes out of the house. Jean and Gambit offer to go after him, partially out of concern for Chris, and partially to keep him from accidentally hurting someone else. Needing some reassurance, Chris heads over to Jeff's house. Jeff comes outside, worried about what happened to Chris after that whole thing at school, and Chris does his best to explain it, how two strangers he saw did something to him, how they made him a mutant. But as he speaks, more electricity builds off of him, and Jeff backs away, horrified. Chris reaches out to his friend, but that just causes Jeff to back away even more. Then he screams for his father. Chris finally leaves, scared, and runs until he collapses, muttering that he needs help. Jean reaches out to him again. They can help him, if he'll let them. So ends Chapter 1. Given the sheer size of this issue, author Mackie breaks the narrative into 2 chapters, and this is as good a spot as any to break down Chapter 1. Obviously, our main focus here isn't on the X-Men. It's on our new character, Chris, so Mackie spends quite a bit of time setting up his life. He's got 2 loving, thoughtful parents, a little sister who's maybe a bit annoying, but she isn't obnoxious, an old friend, and a girl he likes. Chris is perfectly, predictably, classically normal, and is boring as hell. Yes, this book was written in 1994, and Chris is meant to be an everyman type of character. We, as readers, are meant to self-insert, as if we are experiencing what Chris is experiencing. But it's just so boring. And I feel bad saying that. It's not like having 2 caring parents is a bad thing, but come on! You're introducing a new mutant to the X-Men here. Do something with him. Anything to give him some pizzazz, something unique, something memorable. As much as I'm complaining about this story element, I have to admit that Mackie does it well. This story is about a quote-unquote normal teen in America. That's its greatest strength. But I think that it's also its greatest weakness. I do enjoy the slow build of Chris's powers. I like him freaking out about being a mutant as well. Remember, as readers, we spend so much time with the X-Men that we see being a mutant as a positive thing. But mutants are relatively rare, dangerous, and scary to the normal folk of the Marvel Universe. So becoming a mutant would be pretty heckin' freaky. And I do think that this story does a good job following Chris and keeping his point of view realistic. He doesn't want to be a mutant, and only asks for help when he has nothing else to turn to. He has no friends left, and worse, he has no sense of control. All of that stuff works really well. We've gotten to know Chris, his family situation, and have peeked into his personal life. Time for him to get to know the X-Men. Chapter 2 opens with the Bradleys arriving at the X-Mansion. Chris is understandably nervous, probably a bit resentful of his situation. But his parents are nervous too, and we're now told that they're named Bob and Marion. They have no idea what to expect here, but they all need to keep an open mind. If Chris wants to leave at any time, he just has to let them know, and they will. They're here for him, and nothing else. As they exit their car, that option is looking likely. The metal-winged Archangel soars overhead as Storm gathers clouds around herself. The melting remnants of Iceman's slides litter the landscape, and Chris spots the blue-furred beast waving at him from a window. But just as Chris spots each of these people, they disappear, leaving Chris wondering if they were even real. Then Jean says that it's time to meet the professor. Chris nervously steps inside, and sitting in his immaculate blue suit and glorious golden hover chair is Professor Charles Xavier. Our young lead wasn't expecting him to be disabled, but even so, Xavier still feels powerful, as if he's able to look right through Chris. Only it's not like a bad way. More like he can understand what Chris is going through. Xavier extends a hand in greeting, and Chris shakes it. Welcome to the Xavier Institute. The first thing that Xavier shows Chris is the Danger Room. The Danger Room is the X-Men's training center, outfitted with traditional workout materials and high-tech devices like interactive holograms. This allows Xavier to design any number of scenarios to test the X-Men's skills and abilities. Charles has his students give Chris a show, and as he watches them work, like a lot of young teens, he isn't scared of being a mutant anymore. He's thrilled. Someday he really could have control over his powers, maybe even be an X-Man himself. Xavier walks him back from that dream. Being an X-Man would be years away, even if he still wanted to become one then. Right now, their main focus would be gauging his powers and teaching him how to control them. And to that end, Beast collects a blood sample. Having won over Chris, Bob and Marion leave their son in Xavier's care, nervous but hopeful about his future. Jean, however, is still nervous. "Professor," she asks, "what if Chris—" She doesn't manage to finish her sentence. Charles can't afford to ponder that option yet. If that's the case, then they'll be here for the Bradleys. The next day, the X-Men begin a training montage with Chris. Iceman, Storm, Charles, Gambit, all of them help Chris to master his electrical powers and the pain that comes with them. Weeks pass among the mutants, and Chris finds them to be not only good teachers, but good friends. Finally, the pain is totally gone, as are the uncontrollable bursts of power. He goes through one last series of tests, and Chris passes them all. As far as the Xavier Institute is concerned, Chris Bradley has mastered his powers. Chris and Iceman high-five as Charles tells Chris that he's already contacted his parents and that he can leave with them in the morning. But before that, a celebratory meal! The X-Men exit the Danger Room to head into town and visit Harry's hideaway, the X-Men's favorite haunt in Salem Center, the nearest town. None of them can hear Beast contact Charles telepathically, asking him to come to the medical bay. Hank has checked the results of the blood tests again and again. But yeah, it's confirmed now. Charles decides that he needs to contact Chris's parents again. They need to get there as soon as possible. The X-Men and Chris return to the mansion, and Chris is excited to see his folks there. Finally, he can show them what he can do now, but they aren't happy. They're crying. Something is wrong. It has to be. Which is when Charles and Hank inform Chris that he's tested positive for the legacy virus. This was not what they told Chris would happen. They said that he could learn to control his powers, that everything could go back to normal, not this. Chris lets a huge burst of electricity loose and charges out of the mansion. Iceman, who's been working with Chris the most, follows him out and talks him down. No one could have guessed that he would get the legacy virus. It was like 1,000,000 to 1. Chris stops throwing sparks and settles down next to the lake. Iceman joins him. Chris tells Iceman, Bobby, about his friend Jeff. How Jeff reacted poorly to him being a mutant. Chris thought that if he got control of his powers, everything in his life would just go back to normal. But it won't ever be normal now, will it? Bobby says that a true friend accepts you for everything that you are. If Jeff couldn't do that then maybe Jeff isn't really Chris's friend. Chris asks Bobby about what happens when someone dies. Bobby answers truthfully. He doesn't know. Eventually, they return to the mansion, and Chris says his goodbyes. The X-Men are his friends. They're maybe the only ones who really understand what he's going through. He shakes their hands, thanks them for everything, and then leaves. A week later, Chris is trying to find his normal at home. He does go to Jeff's house, hoping to reconnect with his old friend, but no. Jeff hides behind the curtains. Donna, however, does not. She knows that Chris is a mutant, but she isn't scared of him. She likes him as a person. Does he still want to go out, or what? Oh. Well, yeah, of course. But Donna needs to know one more thing about him. Chris tells her about the legacy virus, and that it's really bad. Donna had heard about it on TV and asks him how he's feeling. He responds that he feels physically fine for now, but that he's scared. Really scared. And if she doesn't want to go out with him because of all this, he gets it. He totally gets it. But no, she says, she doesn't care about being popular or what people will think of her. She cares about Chris. She is scared too, but that's okay. Caring about each other is more important. Aww. Later that night, Chris is at home and he calls his friend with the good news. Bobby is never going to guess what happened today. As uninteresting as I found the first half of the comic, the second half of this works super well. After all, if you were a kid growing up and reading the X-Men, Chris's situation here at the beginning is the dream. I wanted cool powers and a not ugly mutation like Chris, and I wanted to live with and train with the X-Men like Chris. But then the news of the legacy virus hits, and that dream is gone. You see, at this point in the comics, there was no cure for the legacy virus. It had been 100% lethal, and so even if Chris could maybe one day become an X-Man, he still wouldn't live for long. He was going to die. So some super props to author Howard Mackey for being able to pull that off. I mean, it works well specifically because it cuts to the core of the fan base's fantasies, and not because we sympathize with Chris, but that's still not necessarily a bad thing. The story has still made its point and really hit home what it was trying to do. There are a few more narrative details that I want to pick at for a moment, though. The first is how much I like Bobby being the one to befriend Chris at the mansion. Bobby was the youngest of the original X-Men, so he's also the closest to Chris in age right now. Plus, during this era of the 90s, Bobby was also struggling with controlling his powers and pushing them to new limits, so he's the most sympathetic to Chris's situation as well. He knows the hard work and discipline that's necessary to gain mastery over one's powers. This responsible teacher-like side of Bobby isn't something that we really get to see very often in the comic books. Typically, it's Wolverine adopting a teenage girl as his sidekick, but it's a nice change of pace here, and I think Iceman was a good fit for this role. The second is how flipping weird it was for Jean and the Professor to suspect Chris's illness right after meeting him. So here's the thing. When a teenager is manifesting mutant abilities, they typically experience headaches and flashes of power, just like Chris did. This would be normal to the Professor and Jean. It's exactly what they would expect to be happening. There is nothing in Chris's experience that should clue the two of them in that Chris may have the legacy virus. However, the legacy virus presents as, get this, headaches, general pain, and uncontrolled flashes of power, just like Chris had. So this frustrates the crap out of me. Plus, from a narrative standpoint, there really isn't even a reason to have them suspect the legacy virus. Sure, it adds an odd feeling of dread to the second half of the narrative, but we didn't need that. Why not just have the school take a blood sample as just part of a standard set of medical tests, and then have Beast discover that Chris has the legacy virus? This would still allow for the big dramatic reveal at the end, and Mackey wouldn't have shown his hand so early in the book. Lastly, I need to comment on how weird it was for the X-Men to take Chris in at all. Sure, the X-Men have a long history of adopting young teenagers, just look at Kitty Pryde or Jubilee. But those characters also appeared in Uncanny X-Men First, as part of the ongoing writer's plan at the time. And sure, they were both moved over to books starring younger mutants, like the New Mutants in the 80s or Generation X in the 90s. And yeah, I know that Kitty never got moved, but there was a plotline dealing with the fact that age-wise, Kitty should have been with the New Mutants. So it was talked about, even if it wasn't followed up upon. But here, Chris is introduced in a spin-off book by a non-ongoing writer in a self-contained story that has no bearing on the main narrative of the other X books. This issue of X-Men Unlimited is perfectly ignorable. And I would have loved to have seen Chris included in one of the main X books, whether that was Uncanny X-Men, X-Men, or Generation X. The legacy virus was a dark cloud that hung over the books at the time, but it was actually rarely addressed. Normally, each issue tended to have Beast lament being unable to do anything about the legacy virus, despite trying, and then we would all move on to the dramatic, awesome X-Men action. Adding Chris in would have brought some more weight to the virus, as the X-Men would have had to watch this young man die while they're helpless to stop it. Or perhaps this could have motivated them to find a cure sooner and save this young man's life. But they didn't. and that's really because of the type of story this is. This isn't a heroic triumph over adversity. This is a dramatic tragedy. Sometimes you work your hardest and do your best, and it's just still not enough. Sometimes you lose. Sometimes you don't get to be an X-Man. And at least Mackie tempers this loss with Donna still remaining interested in Chris. Sure, he might not live for long, but at least he'll get a chance to find happiness while he does live. And that's important too. We've now met two of our important characters for this sweep of episodes, the mysterious Maverick and totally normal mutant Chris Bradley. But other than having the legacy virus in common, these two are about as far apart as you can get. What could possibly bring them together? Next week, we're going to find out. There's one more character that we need to introduce, and we will meet them in a Maverick one-shot from January of 1997, and then Maverick and Chris Bradley will encounter each other for the first time in X-Men Unlimited issue 15. See you folks next week. Everyone, there are a million podcasts vying for your time and attention, and I'd like to thank you for listening to mine. If you would like to get in touch with me to share a concern, request a series, compliment me, berate me, whatever you like, send me an email at cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks for listening.